RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB pros, competitions, whatever it is on your mind, it is all on the table. As we now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, as we start to enter the dog days of summer, hard to believe, but just in a matter of a few days, we're going to be starting our Iron Road to the 2017 Olympia.
Starting to get closer and closer. Obviously, the big year, whether we see Kai Green on that stage or not, still remains to be seen. But of course, we're going to see Phil Heath and the usual cast of cronies, Sean Roden up there, Dexter Jackson trying to get his second Olympia at the age of whatever he is, 48, 49. I think he's a little 1 year younger than me. We have obviously Big Ramy, who's always that X factor in that lineup as well. And so it's exciting. It's exciting for me. I unfortunately have to undergo shoulder replacement surgery. Actually, by the time people listen to this, I probably will have had it already. I'm going to be at Tampa General Hospital there getting the surgery. I'll be in the hospital for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They releasing, I think, me on Wednesday. And once I start getting on the road to recovery after those first couple of weeks, then we'll really be focusing on, obviously, our Olympia coverage. We'll be trying to get as many competitors as possible on live with in our Yamamoto nutrition road to the Olympia. And that's going to be super exciting, of course. But, there's a lot of competition before the Olympia. Qualifications, we got Tampa at the beginning of August, which is a huge show, as well as several other big competitions leading up to the Olympia. So it's not, the summer is really just getting started in a sense, competition-wise. And I'm excited to see who might pop out of the woodwork and surprise a few guys before it's all said and done.
Let's get to the questions. If you want to join us, you could join us in the Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com. If you're not already a member, it is free to register. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can ask your questions in the comment section of the chat box on the right-hand side of the video player. Instagram official_RxMuscle, our official Facebook page, or tweeting using hashtag AskDave. Let's go to Samson8659. How much mixture of insulin and HGH is needed for 100, now he says kilograms, so we might have to do a quick calculation, 100 kilogram bodybuilder for muscle gaining purpose?
Sid, come on, 2.2 pounds per kilo. So 220-pound bodybuilder.
There you go.
I'm a big advocate of about 3 to 5 IUs of GH max per day. And to be honest with you, if you didn't have the money, 2 IUs per day, it would be adequate if you have real GH. I mean, back in the day, we couldn't afford more than 2 IUs per day. And if you could do 2 IUs a day, you were lucky. And we grew on that. So, real GH is pretty potent stuff. Insulin usage, in my mind, is really dependent on how fast your metabolism is. If you have a fast metabolism and you tend to get real flat when you take your GH, you probably want to supplement with some insulin. And I'd probably suggest doing anywhere from 6 to 10 IUs in the morning, Humulin R, and then 5 to 6 hours later do another, 4 to 6 or 8 IUs. Once again, it depends on your size, and I don't know what your metabolism, even though we know you're 220 pounds, we don't really know how fast your metabolism. If you tend to get fat easily, I wouldn't use any insulin with GH. So it's on a case-by-case basis, that you judge whether you use insulin or not with GH.
Let's go to Kurt Williams. Dave, my question is that one of my arms is slightly bigger than the other, and it's noticeable due to doing plastering for 2 years at college. I'm 20 years old and wondering what's the best way to equal them out, as I'm sure the dumbbells and single arm movements, but just wondering if training the smaller arm a little more would actually benefit me in any way.
Yeah, absolutely. At your age, what I would recommend doing, because everyone always has one leg smaller than the other, it's impossible not to. And what I tell people to do is, you could do compound movements like squats, or in your case, upper body movements like, barbell curls or bench presses. You could do bilateral movements where you're doing both arms at the same time. Just only push from the smaller arm. Now, this is a weird thing to think about. Let's say you're doing a bicep curl, for instance. Only pull from the weak arm or the smaller arm. The other arm is invariably going to work anyway because it's probably a little stronger. Okay, you want to maximally stimulate that arm. What happens a lot of times is because you have a dominant arm, that dominant arm does most of the work when you're doing like a bicep curl, and the other arm becomes a stabilizer. Well, we want to reverse that effect. We want to now try to use that weaker arm, the smaller arm, as the main mover, and the other arm as the stabilizer in the compound movement. And what you'll see, little by little, is the weaker arm will catch up to the other arm. When I would squat, I would always lean into my right leg because that was always my smaller leg. And I didn't even think about the left leg. And the left leg still got stimulation because it's just a dominant leg. And that's the best way to do it. And at the end of every workout, let's say if you have a weak biceps, at the end of your bicep workout, do like 1 or 2 sets extra just for that weak arm, unilateral type movements, like you were saying, cables or dumbbells or stuff like that. If you do that, you're fine. If you try to train that weak side every single day, you're going to overtrain it and it's not going to grow. Just listen to what I'm telling you. I promise you it'll work.
Let's go to Dave Hayes. Dave, is it possible that our bodies somehow adapt over time with eating? About 18 months ago, I had to eat around 4,000 calories a day and run about 1.5 G of gear to hold a decent 230 pounds or so. Since then, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, had a lot of time off training, and barely able to eat around 1,000 calories most days. Last 3 months or so, I struggled to eat around 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day and only 150 grams of protein at best, yet I'm only running 400 mg of test, 400 mg of EQ, and up to 225 pounds, and the strongest I've ever been. It makes no sense.
Well, before you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease, you probably were malabsorbing a lot of your food. That's what Crohn's does. The food passes through you too quickly. You don't absorb the nutrients. You kind of poop diarrhea out of your butt. And it's a lot of malabsorption. I lived with a girl we rented a house, a bunch of guys and I, and there was one girl in the house. She rented a room, and she had Crohn's disease. And believe me, she stunk the toilet bowl up, and she was emaciated, and she would eat everything in sight. She'd eat pizza and all kinds of junk food, which was probably terrible for her Crohn's. And she wouldn't gain a pound because she was just poop it right out. So you probably were malabsorbing. Now that you're feeling better and you kind of got your disease under control, you can eat less food and you're probably absorbing it more efficiently is what's happening.
Nevin Cthulhu, is there such thing as taking too many natural supplements? I know food is not what it used to be. After I take my BCAAs, fish oils, vitamins, GABA, yada, 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 I'm pushing about 20 pills a day. Should I take a break?
I take her probably around the same amount, except I don't waste my time on like branched chain amino acid pills or something like that because they're not really necessary. I'm talking vitamins. I take V Mineralized 10 pills a day, 5 and 5. I take my Omega Lyse for my essential fats, 3 pills twice a day. I take Arthrolyse for my joints, 5 pills twice a day. We're already up to over 20 pills right there. Then I take extra vitamin D. As I tell people, I take some CoQ10. So I'm taking a lot of pills, but I think that they're all necessary. If I was adding 20 more pills to that of like branched chain amino acids and glutamine and creatine, now I'm overwhelming my body. So I try to sit down and strategize what's absolutely necessary to assist in all the chemical reactions in the body to bring good health to my body and to make me maximally efficient. And that's what I use. And I do it very regularly because if you only do half of what you should be doing or you don't do it on a regular basis, only a couple days a week, you're not getting the health benefits out of it. So sit down, figure out what you need. I make it pretty simple for people. You can buy V Mineralized, Omega Lyse, and you got all your vitamins, minerals, and essential fats taken care of, except for maybe a little extra vitamin D you got to take. And then you take a good fiber supplement like Fiberlyze, you're covered essentially. The other stuff is icing on the cake. So once again, you got to figure out what works because you could spend $100 million on pills out there, taking 40,000 bottles a day, and you still might not get what you need. So make sure you get what you need at least first, and then everything else is icing on the cake after that.
Georgios Siporidis, Dave, what do you say to MCT oil in black coffee before training when training in the morning, or should there only be carbs with protein like isolate with oats?
Did he say before weight training in the morning or before cardio?
No, before. Well, he just says training in the morning. My rule of thumb is if you're going to weight train, make sure you have some protein in your system, okay?
because we don't want to cannibalize muscle tissue. If you're doing cardio, empty stomach. You don't want to take anything in. You know, a cup of black coffee with maybe a sweetener in there is fine, but you don't want to be putting, you know, MCT oil in there because that's a fuel source that your body will use preferentially. If you're doing cardio in the morning to burn fat, you want to use stored body fat. So always eat before you weight train. Try to do cardio on as empty a stomach as possible, meaning either first thing in the morning or after you weight train, or, you know, maybe 2 hours after a meal, if that's the best you can do. I don't think it's a good idea to be taking MCT fats in necessarily before you do cardio. And before you weight train, if you take MCT fats, yeah, you got some fuel, but you don't really have any amino acids, so you want to definitely have some kind of protein in your system. So I usually tell people to have a whey isolate shake in the morning. Maybe if you want to put MCTs, that's fine, or I would probably put some all-natural peanut butter or macadamia nut oil, but that's something you definitely want to do with protein before you train.
Mark South or South, what is your formula for dosing T3?
I've said this a million times before. I usually start people off at 25 micrograms per day, and then I will increase it by 12.5 micrograms every 1 to 3 weeks, depending on, you know, the progress people are making. And I never go above 100 micrograms per day. As a matter of fact, I try to stay under 75, but some people just need a little extra boost, but I don't ever go over 100 micrograms per day.
Let's go to D. Mortzell. Dave, how often do you think one should get chiropractic work done or a massage?
I probably am guilty of not getting it done enough. Matter of fact, I'm going to my first chiropractor's appointment here in Florida tomorrow. It's at least once a week chiropractic manipulation. Ideally, while you're training, maybe twice a week if you need it. Massage, if you can afford it, once a week is great. If you can't, maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, just to really, you know, get a nice deep tissue massage. I think that's a good idea. Once again, it all depends on how much money you have to spend. Don't bankrupt yourself on getting massages and the chiropractic manipulations if you can't afford it. But at the same time, if you're training at an elite level and you're really big and you're pushing maximum weights, you're going to have to get some tune-ups every couple of weeks. I think it's going to make your lifting that much better.
Got a deep question here by Paul Bennett. I know you're always sharing stories about your experiences with your father, Sal. You always put a humorous spin to it, but I'm sure it cannot be easy for you when you actually are dealing with it. My question is simply, how do you deal with it? What's your thought process? How do you prevent frustrations and anger from growing towards your father rather than his condition? I, too, am dealing with an older parent with mental and memory issues, so I'd really like your perspective and would encourage you to keep sharing these stories, as I'm sure I'm not alone in believing that they can help me through my challenges.
Yeah, it's tough. When I go see my dad, when he starts not asking the same question 400 times, I was originally getting angry and like getting sarcastic with him, and I realized, what am I doing? I mean, he doesn't remember. I'm an imbecile. It's like talking to a child. It's like talking sarcastically to a child. So I stopped doing that, and what I started doing is agreeing with everything he says. So if he calls me up and says, "All right, you got to get over here. I'm packing. We're flying out. I got to get back home." I'll be there in an hour. Because I know he's not going to, in 10 minutes, he won't, in 10 minutes, 30 seconds, he probably won't remember. So I kind of humor him that way. And if you just tell him everything he wants to hear, he's not going to get stressed out. It's not going to affect me at all. He's not going to remember that I said that to him, so he's not going to like throw it in my face later. And all is good in the world. The truth of the matter is, and John Romano and I talked about this, the only one suffering is me. He's fine. He can't remember anything. So for him, he's living a very blissful life, you know. You are upset because you know what the reality of the story is. He does not understand the reality of it. So I once I realized that, I stopped getting upset about it, and I know he's getting along there because the nurses tell me, "Oh, we had a Louis Armstrong impersonator the other day, and your father got up and started singing Louis Armstrong," and I'm like, "He did?" I asked my dad about it. He has no recollection of it, but he did it, and everyone loved it, and they clapped. So I'm sure at that moment in time, my dad was feeling like $1 million. The other day, they had some kind of like arts and craft things. I'm like, my dad went? They're like, not only did he go, he was drawing pictures of everyone. They couldn't believe how talented he was. I'm like, they're like, you should bring him a sketchbook. I'm like, I knew my dad would eventually settle in. I didn't know he was because he doesn't remember, so he doesn't tell me. But now that I talked to the nurses, I know that my dad is in good hands over there. So once again, don't take it personally. A lot of times, it's more painful for the family than it is for the actual person going through it. Luckily, my dad recognizes me and my family still. He just can't remember anything that happened 10 minutes before.
Let's go to This Is Patrick. What are your thoughts on already cooked packet chicken?
You got to be careful with it because once again, it goes back to always read the ingredient list on anything you buy. Not the protein, fat, carbs, the ingredient list. Because the ingredient list tells you everything you need to know about a food. What's in it. So if you read the back of a chicken package of whatever, pre-prepared chicken, the number one ingredient will probably most likely be chicken. If it's not, you're in trouble. The second ingredient is usually some kind of flavoring system, okay? Especially in pre-made stuff. That's where you have to start reading because there could be sugar, molasses, honey, dextrose, sucrose. They have a million different disguises for the word sugar and carbs. Read your ingredient list, understand what's in there before you buy it. Because if you're on a diet, a low-carb diet especially, and you're buying chicken that's marinated with stuff that has carbs in it, you're screwing yourself up. So always read the ingredient list. And that goes with everything you buy. Any product you buy, if you see a product on the shelf that, wow, this looks pretty damn good, I really want to buy this, read the ingredients before you pick it up and buy it. The ingredient list does not lie. If you look at it, I can't believe it's not butter, one of those butter sprays that have supposedly 0 calories. Of course they do, because the serving size is so small. The problem is, go read the ingredients. The ingredients are going to say some kind of a polyunsaturated fat, and probably one of them that's not that healthy. Could even be a hydrogenated fat, which is a trans fat. So you stay away from those. So you got to be very cautious as to what you purchase.
Let's go to Camille B. Bodybuilding. Dave, what do you think about going off Tremblin a week before the show? There are opinions that Tren holds some water, so it's better to stay on Winstrol or Haltestin.
I tell people to up the dosage of Tremblin the last week because it's so high in androgens that it really helps store. Androgens are glycogen stores. They help facilitate the storage of glycogen. So when you carb up those last 3 days, if you have a lot of Tremblin in your system, I'm not talking exorbitant dosages. I'm talking maybe max 100 milligrams per day. You will glycogen load your muscles way better. They'll look harder and denser on stage. Any extra water that Tremblin may cause, you're going to get rid of with a diuretic anyway, and you're going to get rid of with restriction of fluid the last 12 to 18 hours. So it's not an issue. It's not an issue. That's one of the drugs you can keep in right up to the show.
Let's go to big_Pete_bodybuilding. Dave, how do you protect the liver pre-contest, and how do you recognize if the liver is not working efficiently?
Milk thistle is probably your best bet, also known as silymarin, which is the chemical in there. I'm actually going to, I just started, I haven't put it up on my website yet. I started selling because I sell a product called Kidney Stuff. Everyone buys it from me. It's a great kidney detoxifier. It's probably the best one available out there. I don't even think there are many, but this product kicks ass. I mean, everyone should do at least 60 days out of the year for 2 packages of it. But I'm starting to sell, I was going to put together my own liver product, but I looked over, Bill Llewellyn and I were talking, I sell his Roy test on my Dave Palumbo website exclusively. And I noticed him and I were discussing, and he said, I have a really good liver cleansing product. And I looked at the ingredient list and I really liked it a lot. And I said, why should I try to rediscover the wheel? He already did all the work for me. So I'm going to be selling his. He's wholesaling it to me, and I'm going to retail it on DavePalumbo.com. Once again, excellent idea to take some kind of a milk thistle silymarin product, because what it does is it dilates the bile ducts, in the liver, that's where the liver gets rid of all the waste products. When you take a lot of anabolic steroids or anything that's toxic to the liver, alcohol, etc., it causes the liver to swell, and a lot of times these little ducts get blocked off, and you get backup of waste into the liver. You get swelling of the liver, and sometimes you can get scar tissue or collagen laying down in the liver. That's obviously very dangerous. That could damage the liver and make it unusable in certain parts. So we don't want that to happen. The milk thistle will keep those vessels dilated, allowing them to rid the liver of waste on a regular basis. And that's ultimately what we were looking for. How could you tell if you're liver toxic? Well, sometimes people, if your eyes get yellow, that's a bad sign. That's jaundice. That means you're really backed up. Most people won't get to that point, but you might feel tired. You might not feel as energized. You might feel, you might just not, your appetite can suffer. I'll tell you one thing, whenever I took toxic anabolic orals like Anadrol, within days, within a week, I couldn't eat anymore. And probably because my liver was being stressed out. And your liver doesn't work efficiently, you don't digest your food well. And if you don't digest your food well, you certainly don't want to eat. You're not going to get a good appetite because your body's in a state of poor health. So after trying a few times, I decided I'm never using any orals anymore. And I didn't really, most of my career, I didn't use any orals the second half of my career. And I felt a lot better because of it. And I think it helped preserve my body by not doing that and putting that kind of stress on my organs.
Maybe a bit of a free consultation here, but George RJ6XX, if someone came to you and said, Dave, I want to be shredded, I have 5 weeks until the show, and I'm around 8% body fat, what diet and training schedule would you put them on in order to get them in shape, cardio, supplements, weights, and diets?
Yeah, that's a homework assignment. You know I don't do homework. But the truth is that it would be impossible for me to give you an answer based on the data you provided me, because number one, I didn't see any pictures of the person. Number two, I haven't asked them anything about their metabolism, how they metabolize foods. Are they fast metabolism, slow metabolism, endomorph, mesomorph, ectomorph? So I don't know enough information to give you the right thing. If someone comes to me with like 3 or 4 weeks to go and says I need to get ripped really fast and they're not in shape, I put them immediately on a ketogenic diet because that's going to work the fastest and the most efficiently. But if the person has a fast metabolism and their body fat's kind of low already, they may not need it. I might give them a couple days with, a day or two here and there with no carbs, and then, the rest of the days with some carbs. So it really depends on what the person looks like and what their metabolism is.
Jacoby Alb, a loaded question here. Do you think anyone can dethrone Phil Heath?
Anyone can be beaten on any day. That's a guaranteed fact. Probably for Phil Heath to lose, given the people he's competing against right now in bodybuilding, he'd probably have to beat himself, meaning he'd have to show up out of shape, and then either Rodin or Dexter or even a crazy Big Ramy comes in and dominates the show and wins it. I don't think Phil's going to lose if he comes in at his best. If he looks like he looked last year, he'll be very hard to beat. Even a Kai Green in the best shape of his life might have trouble beating Phil Heath from last year. Not that he's the world beater, not that he's the Ronnie Coleman, Dorian Yates dominating physique, of his day, Lee Haney, but he's good enough, and he can get ridiculously shredded, and he's got nice shape and proportion. He's got the freaky arms, that are very showy, good pecs and delts, and even though he's not that wide genetically, bone structure-wise, he's very impressive on stage. He's very, as Chris Aceto would say, comic book cartoony looking, and it's an aesthetic look to him. So the only way he loses, once again, is if someone more freaky comes in than he is. The only person that comes to really mind is Big Ramy. If Big Ramy comes in ridiculously shredded with his size and dimension, I don't think anyone could beat him, but we haven't seen that. He's gotten the closest he's gotten last year under the watchful eye of Chris Aceto. He's no longer with Chris. I think that's a bad move on his part. And so I don't think it's going to end well for him this year. I hope it does because he's an exciting bodybuilder and I love his physique. But I think that Phil is going to repeat again this year because, like I said, I don't think there's anyone out there who's that good who can push out a Phil Heath that's at 100%.
We'll take one more. Big fan of the show. Ahmed Akinci wants to know when we're going to get Charles Claremont on the show.
I would love to have him on because I know he's he used to be very good friends with Jerry Scalisi, out in Long Island. They used to compete together. Matter of fact, Jerry claims that he's the one who actually got him his IFBB Pro card because they used to compete in NABBA together, I think. And Jerry, I knew someone and they made a phone call and they gave Charles a pro card. And Jerry feels that Charles Claremont was an underrated bodybuilder, that he was one of the best out there at the time, and he probably should have gone even higher than he did. So I would, if he's available, I would certainly like to get him on. I love to do the historical shows and learn about where he was and where he came from and what it was like competing against all the top guys back in the 90s. Sure, for sure.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Once again, visit speciesnutrition.com. For Johnny Styles and Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.